Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. For those of you who don't know, my name is David Ochi. I'm happy to be working with you on the Beall Butterworth competition. This is our second workshop, and I can tell you we have one of my favorite people in the startup ecosystem in Orange County, if not my favorite person, but don't tell her that because it'll get to her head. But we're going to be talking about Pretotyping, and she's an expert in that and everything you could imagine on a number of things. But for those of you who aren't aware, the Beall Butterworth competition is a competition designed that is made up of two separate competitions technically. The first one is the Butterworth competition, which is designed around the School of Computer Science at UCI. And the Beall competition is focused around engineering. They work in parallel, they work together, they work simultaneously. So there's a lot of overlap, and that's why we frequently just call it the Beall Butterworth competition. Just to give you a quick overview again, it's designed to help you learn about design and become product developers in a practical sense of actually doing the work rather than just writing a paper about it or being involved in a class or something. In order to compete in the end, you must have at least one ICS student for Butterworth and one engineering student for Beall. And then, of course, the team itself must be made up of students from UCI, as we've mentioned. I'll go quickly through these things. If you haven't yet done an intent to enter, that would be great. There'll be a due date on March 6th for the first phase, which would be the concept paper, which for those of you who are wondering is the exact same concept paper that you want to use for your new venture competition if you'd like. Then there'll be a midpoint review right after spring break where we'll let the judges speak with you and talk with you about your progress and show you where they think there might be room for improvement and growth and that sort of thing. And then in mid-May, there will be a final, and I realized I have not updated that. That's been moved to the 20th and the 25th, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll fix that. So anyway, so if we go to the schedule here, we have added a workshop in case you were counting the workshops, which I'm sure nobody was, but there are now 6. And so we're in the second one. They'll run Wednesday nights. That will encourage you to go ahead and register through Eventbrite, where we keep everyone updated about it. And then you can see in the spring, there'll be much more of a coaching approach, working individually with the teams to try to help build the concepts and the demos that they're working on. So with that, I am excited, as you can see, Cynthia's wonderful mugshot. Cynthia is an icon, I'll call her, in the entrepreneur ecosystem in Orange County. If you have anybody that's involved with the startups, the Cove, any number of the different organizations, you'll find Cynthia's fingerprints all over it. And it's not just a recent thing where she jumped in over the last year. She's been an active and enjoyable participant on many levels. She has a background in design and manufacturing. She's dealt a lot with furniture, of all things, which has given her a lot of that practical, physical type of element to deal with in manufacturing and all supply chain issues and quality control and all that kind of stuff. And yet she's got this technology bend that you are going to see come screaming out, I'm sure, during the presentation, where she really has her pulse on a lot of the tech tools and the things that help make things more efficient, make it easier, keep track of things, whatever it might be. So with that, she does have some patents, as it mentions there. And she has, I'm sure, more pending. I know some of the more recent ones have been really fun, which maybe she'll enlighten you on some of those. But with that, her topic tonight is about pretotyping, which is, of course, a cutesy words for what do you do in the early parts of prototyping, right? And even before you prototype. So with that, let's give her a big Zoom welcome, however you want to do it, like jazz hands, or if you want to clap, or I don't know, whatever you might come up with. So thank you, Cynthia, for coming on board, and we look forward to this.
Thanks, guys. Okay, so yeah, when he said I'm not new to this, I've been mentoring for over 10 years. And my first company I started when I was in college. So for all of you aspiring to be entrepreneurs, that's what I did. I started my first company while I was in college and grew them from there. The first company was a design firm, so definitely have a background in design. I started in architecture, so plans and all that type of stuff is like second nature to me. And it really helped me get a lot of jobs when I was doing design work because I could read everybody's plans. which was, helpful. So over when he's talking about the patents that I have granted are in the pet industry and then in advertising technology. I have patents pending in authentication devices, video advertising, and then some special patents in what our manufacturing company makes, which is behind me, which is a specialty one-way vision privacy shade. So we have patents going through on that. So I think I have 6 or 7 pending right now with my partners and myself. So we're pretty aggressive about protecting the stuff that we do. But tonight, what I'm going to try to show you is some of the types of things that you can do when you're starting out and just coming up with ideas. This started on the computer. So I was helping another entrepreneur with his idea, which was he was trying to put a zipper, aftermarket zipper into a screen door so that dogs and cats could come in and out. And what we came up after trying like 35 different things, it was very obvious to us that it was going to be ugly no matter what we did aftermarket. So the only way we could do an aftermarket was like a full blank that somebody would switch out on their screen doors. But while I was doing that, I decided that because it was so ugly, maybe there was a way to camouflage it, which got me going, well, what if, and so I threw together some stuff on my computer and started mocking up what would happen if I did these things on screens, and could we print on screens? And we ended up turning it into a shade instead of a screen, but it's actually screen material. It took us a year to figure out how to print on this stuff. But the initial concept and the things I showed to people were all on my computer. And then it was kind of a take a look and see, well, is this viable? What's the market like? And so if I were going to say I have a superpower, my superpower is research. I can find pretty much anything. And so I do workshops on like market size, tools, and what we're doing today, which is prototyping. Now, a lot of this lecture workshop type thing is based on work that was done by a professor up in Stanford. And I had read his stuff and gone through all his materials. And I asked him at one point if he'd come down and do a lecture for the Inventors Forum, which is a great resource for all you guys if you don't know about it. The organization is over 30 years old. It's in Orange County. They meet at Eureka Building usually, and then they meet at Urban Workshop. If you don't know about Urban Workshop, all you engineer guys, you should know about Urban Workshop. It's over in Irvine, and it's at 365 Clinton. It's basically a playground for makers. 26,000 square feet of every kind of tool that you would like to play with. Things from metalworking, fabricating of all sorts. They even have industrial sewing machines. They have form modeling. They have woodworking, Arduinos, you name it, they've got it. So it's like a gym membership. You pay for a monthly membership and you can go in and use their tools. So when I asked him to come down and talk to our group, he said, I don't have time, but you can give my lecture anytime you want. And he sent me all his stuff. So that's what some of this is based on. So, whoops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay, so prototyping is his term for low fidelity prototyping. It's just a lot easier to say. So it's like pre-prototyping. And these are some examples of prototypes. So instead of actually doing a whole mock-up on computer, you might do a paper mock-up on a UI UX layout. This is actually a cardboard prototype of a robotic hand that then they wired up. So instead of 3D printing, you can even do it in cardboard. So there's some really cool cardboard stuff that's going on. And then this was one of my first mock-ups. This is in the computer. This does not exist in real life. And this was one of the ways I started figuring out how we were going to do what we do in our factory. So this is where it all started. He did a manifesto, which is pretty fun. So it was Unleash the Innovators. And so when you go through it, innovation over ideas, right? So the people that are creating stuff that are actually doing it, not just talking about it. So do over talk, take over ask, commitment over committees. That's a big one. Committees do not get a lot done. So, really buying into something and pushing behind it is really important. 200% over 20% obvious. Why not over why? Richard Fleming and I do this one all the time. People will say, well, why do you want to do that? And it's like, why wouldn't I want to do that? Pretotype before you build product type. So you want to rough out ideas before you actually start investing any money to building them, because you can lose a lot of money that way. And on that particular point, I'll tell you a really quick story. I have a patent in the pet industry for a shrinkable ID tag. And our first prototypes of it were existing material that was on the market, a polystyrene that we used to create the tag. We thought we could use that material on our initial run. And so we ordered in a batch that cost us $10,000 and ran the first run, but we hadn't tested it long enough on the dogs that were going to be wearing these things. And what we found out after about a month was that they were chewing on them and biting them in half because the stuff wasn't thick enough. And so we had to scrap $10,000 worth of material and then have a custom batch extruded. So that was a $10,000 mistake because we jumped the gun too fast. And we didn't test it long enough at the easy knock around stage to make sure that we had the right stuff. So pretotyping is save you a lot of money. And his thing of don't finish what you've started. There's a lot of times when you are trying something out, kind of like that zipper in the screen door, that you look at it and you look at it and you look at it and you go, yeah, this is not going to work. not in the way he was thinking. And so scrap it and go on to something else that will work. Failure is an option. Failure is, I wish we could come up with a different word, because failure has such a bad connotation to it that if you just basically say, non-starter instead of failure, this was a non-starter. It wasn't a failure. I think maybe it would put people's head in a better spot. And reinvent the wheel, and the more the messier. I love that part because I'm constantly prototyping something and it's always messy. So that turned into the Pretotyping manifesto. And he tweaked certain things. A lot of it's still the same. But it's basically still the same concept moving forward, which is knock up something together really quick and then see what you've got, run it up the flagpole, see if anybody salutes, if they like it or not. And then you can move forward from there and see what happens. So there's kind of large groups of types of pretotypes. And these are the first three that we'll go over. So one's called the fake door. That's for online stuff. Pinocchio is making something that wants to be real and isn't yet. And then the impersonator is basically where you're starting with somebody else's thing and then kind of tweaking it in some way, packaging it up and see if anybody likes it. So I'll go over each of those. So at any point, if you guys have a question, just chime in, take yourself off mute and ask me a question, okay? This is a fake door. So a fake door is an offer for a product or a feature that doesn't exist. So in this particular case, this group created this product, but on their website, they were trying to decide whether or not anybody would care if they had different language translations on the site, because this used to be more expensive than it is now. Now you can do some language translations that don't cost very much. But at that point, it was expensive. So what they did was they put the other languages up, but what they found out was that, and this happens a lot for fake doors that are for products, where somebody will put up a landing page and say, you know, you can buy this for this amount, you click into it and then you find out it's not a real product, that can really make people angry. So what they found out was they had to have a response afterwards that basically said, thanks for voting, or thanks for letting us know, you know, that this would be a viable thing because we're testing this and we're evaluating the interest in this product or this feature. And then when they did that, people didn't get angry. So if you're going to try a fake door, always make sure that you have some kind of a response to them that lets them know, thank you for letting us know, because this is our way of evaluating whether or not we could actually get this product off the ground. Then they don't feel like they've been completely misled, which can happen with this type of a thing. So it's an entry point. A lot of times people will put up multiple landing pages. If you have a product, you might put it at different price points. If you're doing a SaaS model, you might have different subscription levels that you're testing out. And that way you can test it, see what people think before you actually launch. And it can give you a lot of really good feedback and information on products that you're making. We've used it a couple of times for things. It's kind of like a pre-start to A/B testing. A/B testing is more when you have something further along, although the multiple landing pages with different price points is an A/B test. An A/B test just means that you're, and this is important for you guys because not everybody does this right. A/B testing can be incredibly valuable. And the key to it is that you can only change one thing. A lot of times people will change more than one thing on their A/B tests, and then you don't know what the variable was that made the people change their mind. So if you're doing A/B test, one change, just one. The more things you change, the more useless it becomes. So
Cynthia, not to interrupt, but
yeah, no, interrupt, please.
What's an A/B test?
A/B test is testing two things. You might test two different colors of something. One of the ones that I always thought was really interesting was the difference between buy now and learn more. Huge difference in the response on whether or not somebody's purchases. Don't use buy now, use learn more. They did a big study on that at USC in their UI/UX department over there. And they had like a 24% difference. I mean, it was massive. So I never use buy now. I always use learn more. People will click in to learn more. And once you get them to click in, a lot of times you can capture them from there. But buy now can scare them off. But basically you're running two things at the same time to test which one works better. There's a company that is the world's best analytic company by far. Nobody else is even close. It's called CB Insights. You should all have a subscription to their newsletter. They put out the best stuff that you will ever find for your businesses on their newsletters. You won't be able to afford a subscription. It's on my wish list if I'm ever phenomenally rich, because it's like their base subscription is like $7,000 a month. They ran a fintech event, and to qualify to attend, you had to have a company that was $1 billion or more in value. So these guys are like the cream of the crop. But they send out this daily newsletter for all of us peons out there, and they give us these incredible data points and insights that I never miss. But when they send them out, they actually did an article on how they do their A/B test on their emails. And they send out 10% of their emails, they split it in half, and they run two different subject lines. And whichever ones come back with the highest number of opens and interactions within the first hour, that's what they send out the rest of their email list to. So that's an A/B test. Two different subject lines, one variable change to see what happens when it comes back. So any other questions on those? Fake doors, any of that? Okay, so
Thanks.
And I was just going to say, when your earlier slide, when you talked about the test of Germany, the language, I mean,
yeah,
ultimately, that is with the context of the maximum amount of people in the world you could reach, right?
yeah.
And that's kind of the thinking locally, globally, right?
Yeah, and that is a really good point, and Richard is really good about that. He has offices not only here but London, and he teaches in Milan. So um, when you're thinking, as you're thinking about scaling up, you have to think about a global presence, and that's where things like language translation stuff comes into play. Even within the United States, having multiple languages is really beneficial. So the second type is called a Pinocchio. And this is probably, for all you engineering students, this is really an important one. And a Pinocchio is doing something that is really down and dirty. Like, this is, a vending machine costs a fortune to get a prototype on. I mean, really a fortune. There are tens of thousands of dollars to get a little prototype on a vending machine. But there's all these guys that are doing incredible mock-ups in cardboard. And this is a working prototype in cardboard that is totally down and dirty. You know, this little thing that shows what they want to make and how it would work. And then they can take this and go from there and make into something that actually, you know, looks good and cool and the rest of it. But the first thing is, if you put it together and you put it out somewhere, would somebody actually buy something? And just trying to figure out the logistics of how something works, how something goes together. One of my favorite stores for doing prototypes is Daiso, because everything's so cheap. And I go in, I walk the aisles and I go, what could I put together? What can I cobble together with the stuff that's in here, you know? And then we come back and we rip things apart and we put them back together. And, you know, I do the same thing at Home Depot. I walk the aisles of Home Depot looking for little things that we can rip apart and reassemble into what we're trying to take a look at. So this is a really interesting look at a cardboard prototype that they had gone through a number of iterations on, and then the actual product that they put together. So they took it to the point where it really looked great in cardboard, but it took them about, I think it was about 8 iterations before they got to this point. And once they got to this point, then they said, okay, now we'll spend the money to do the molds and stuff, because molds are super expensive. So, you know, the closer that you can get doing things on the cheap and figuring out all the mistakes before you start spending money is really important, from a manufacturing end of things, just incredibly important. So, so Pinocchios, it's, you know, it's either inanimate, sometimes it's inanimate. I know that there was one, and I'm not sure if it was a UCI team, it might have been a Chapman team, but they were putting together a prototype on whether or not somebody would buy a customized card from a vending machine. And David, I think you know this story, where they put a big cardboard box and they put one of their team members inside with a printer. And you had a choice of like 4 different cards on the outside, and you could type in on the iPad what you wanted in the card, and the guy inside typed it in and printed it out, and then he slipped it through a slot when they slipped $5 in through the slot. But what it did was it validated that people would come over and buy a card that would come from a vending machine that could be customized. And that's what they were looking to figure out. And they just set it up in a mall with the permission of the mall owner. And people came over and slipped $5 and they slipped out cards. So, so you can go amazingly cheap trying to figure out the basic validity of your model, and you can make really fast changes. You can see in here, you see a paper model of a UI UX. This is done a lot of times. I mean, now I use Envision for prototyping UI UX type things. which allows me to build things in Illustrator or Photoshop, output them as screenshots. Actually, it takes my whole file now. I don't have to do the screenshots anymore, but you can upload screenshots or you can upload the file, and then you can hotwire it together. And the first time I did it was probably, God, it's got to be 8-9 years ago. I was at a startup weekend and I wired together a basic fake out okay, how many of you know about startup weekends? Can I see hands? Have any of you done startup weekends? Richard has, nobody else. Ooh, they gotta start running startup weekends again. David, you should run one over at one of the schools.
Actually, not a bad idea to see if we could make it part of the competition. It's just one
God,
of the
it would be really good for all you guys. A startup weekend is 54 hours of madness. You meet on Friday evening, you go through some icebreakers, you come with an idea, everybody gets up and has a minute to pitch an idea. Then you basically hang up these things where people can vote on your ideas, whether or not they think it's cool and they want to participate. And you form up teams. You have until Sunday night to put a product together in some kind of validation form, some marketing data together, and pitch it to investors. So Sunday night you are pitching in front of a group of investors. And I did it on a whim like 9 years ago. And we had 12 people that we assembled onto the team. I was not the lead. I got recruited from my idea over to somebody else's. And we had 12 people on the team. We ended up with a working web-based one and a fake out, well, a working mobile one and a fake out on the web. And all of our marketing basic information to validate it. And we got into an accelerator based on those things. So I spent 3 months in K5 accelerator in their first cohort. And that was an incredible learning experience. But you can do a lot with fake outs. You know, the thing that we showed them, they thought it was a working model, and it wasn't. It was completely hot wired together inside InVision. So putting those together in InVision, you can do basic wireframes, which are just little boxes that don't have any design to them at all. Or you can go to a more refined design type look, and you can, you know, link everything together so that when you click on a spot, it actually takes you to the next screenshot. That would be where you would go if it actually had programming behind it, but it's a completely dumb set of screens that are just wired together. So they're very, very helpful. But God, startup weekends, if you can find one in the area, go to it. It is more fun than I can tell you. It's normally limited to 300 people. They bring in 100 biz dev people, 100 programmers, and 100 designers maximum. And sometimes they'll cut that in half. So it's 50, 50, 50. And you form up teams and do all this stuff. And God, it's just fun. I did one for NASA. There was one called the NASA Apps Challenge. And we had a lot of guys from UCI that did it a few years ago. And I got there late and I couldn't decide if I wanted to mentor or participate. And at the last minute, I decided to participate instead of mentoring. And they took 2 teams and pushed them up to the nationals, and I was one of them. So that was kind of fun. So anyway, the Pinocchio is, you know, it wants to be real, but it's not.
Hey, Sin, you're getting some good questions. They're putting them in
chat.
Oh,
see, I can't see the chat while I'm presenting.
They say, do investors ever invest in ideas in startup weekends?
Yeah, they do, actually. There have been some early stage investors that come into startup weekend. You usually have a panel of anywhere from 3 to 5 guys that are investors who will come in and do the judging. They're not necessarily judging to invest. It's really normally it's a fake thing, but every now and then something really cool comes out of startup weekend. And there are a lot of invitations to incubators during startup weekends. So we applied to 2 we applied to 3. We narrowed down to 3 people that wanted to move forward with it. And we applied to I think it was 500 startups. And then there was the other one that offered us the seat, and I'm going blank on their name, and then K5. K5 was Orange County, and they offered us the immediate cohort, and the other one we were going to have to wait for 3 months. So we took K5's offer. But the founder ended up blowing up the project, so it happens. But it was a lot of fun while it lasted. I learned a lot. And that's one thing to also keep in mind. If you're doing a team for the competition and it blows up afterwards, just write it off and move forward. You might circle back and do something with it down the line, but it's also one of those things where take it for a learning experience and don't get too hung up on it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Can you explain what you mean by the founder blew it up? What does that mean?
Yeah, it happens a lot, especially on startup weekends. He was having a disagreement with the incubator, and we had come in. We had a brilliant CTO, and on the advice of one of the advisors, he kind of pushed the kid out and brought in kind of more of a mercenary. He was a CTO that kept jumping from company to company, trying to get equity in different companies. The kid that he kind of pushed out now works for Google, has for since he blew up that startup. The guy is brilliant, and it was a huge mistake to do that to him. And when he did that, the two of us ended up leaving off the team, so that kind of killed the team. But it was an interesting concept. I may circle back to it in a year or two because it still hasn't been done. But a lot of times you'll see, there's arguments among startup teams that go into a startup weekend over equity issues. And I'll give you a tool at the end that will help with some of that kind of thing to keep that from happening as you go forward. But inevitably, there are teams that blow themselves up because nobody can decide who should have what inside a company, and they dissolve the company because of it. Any other questions? Crickets? Okay. Okay, so this next one is an impersonator. An impersonator is basically taking something that's already out there. You know, I talked about Daiso and how I cannibalize things over there. For our first shade that we did for Covert Ink, we actually ordered an IKEA shade, ripped off their shade, and put the mesh material that we had been working with into that to see how it would look as a shade construction. So that was just totally cannibalizing somebody else's stuff on the mechanism. And then we ended up sourcing a better mechanism, and then we actually 3D print some of our components inside our shades because ours work really well and much better than everybody else's. But you know, this is the starting point, right? A little crappy $2 peeler, and they took out the stemmed part, and then they started putting it into different handles until they designed the OXO model as it is. I actually have that in my drawer. But they started with somebody else's product so that they had that initial thing that would cost them a lot to machine or manufacture, because that little piece of metal is not always easy to construct out. And then they stuck it into different handles to see what it felt like, what it looked like, and they're all down and dirties. You know, they're really quick. But that's a impersonator. Is you might take an existing product, put a better grip on it. Maybe it had a solid handle that was similar to this, and then they found that people didn't like the grip or the shape. Maybe they needed a ridge in it. And so you try different things by rebuilding, adding to. I've done a lot of stuff with Fimo clay. I don't know if you guys know that, but it's a bakeable clay that you can put in your oven. And it comes out like stone when you're done. So you can shape something up in Fimo clay, which is available at Michael's, bake it in your oven for a few minutes, and you take it out, and you can use a Dremel tool, shape it from there. And you've got a physical thing. It comes in all kinds of colors. So you can do all kinds of very quick prototyping with things that are on the market already that are very, very cheap. At our factory, we have 3D printers because we found that it was way cheaper for us to use 3D printers than it was for us to pay for extrusions and custom parts. So we 3D print our custom parts that we use. But even 3D printing can be more expensive than a lot of this other stuff, and it can take a lot longer. 3D printing is not always the quickest thing in the universe. So, so basically taking an existing product, you save on development costs like crazy. And you can test stuff really, really fast. You can iterate a lot of different things. If I was trying those handles, I might make, 10 or 20 different handles out of Fimo clay, bake them out, try them out, put them in people's hands and see how they like them. And that's one of the nice things is that in 3D printing or something like the clay, you can make multiples that you can then have a bunch of friends, okay, caveat with friends. Friends can be very helpful if you tell them to really be hard on you. And even then, sometimes it can be a problem. I had a factory that made furniture, and we did like production furniture. This was not one-off cutesy stuff. We made 16 pieces of furniture. We did $17 million a year in 16 pieces of furniture. So a lot of volume in a high-end oak bedroom furniture. Okay, when we started, we got a whole bunch of people that we knew. We invited them over to take a look at our stuff and get feedback. And everybody was, oh, this is great stuff. Oh, this is maybe a little small. This feels good. But one of the problems was we had done a custom stain on our oak furniture that everybody said they loved. Not a good feedback on that one. We took it to trade shows and we couldn't move it. And we ended up sticking our furniture in the back of a pickup truck and driving through California. We drove all the way up to Northern California and back, up and down little roads going to all these different oak companies, and finally hit a guy that I will be forever thankful for in Fresno, who said, I love your design, but I'd never be able to sell it with that stain color. And I said, what do you mean about the stain color? And he said, in the oak bedroom industry, there are two stains, light golden oak and dark golden oak. He goes, if you make it in those two colors, I'll buy it today. And we went, oh my God, yes. We called up our stain guy. We said, throw away all of our stain and bring us in light golden oak and dark golden oak. And that guy placed an order for 50 nightstands, 50 beds, 50 dressers, and got us up and running. And so understanding that you have to take friends' advice with a real grain of salt. Always try to get some people that you don't know, who don't know you, and tell them to be really hard on you, because otherwise it can really send you down an expensive detour. Anything on those three? No? Okay. So Mechanical Turk. Mechanical Turk is actually, if you know about Amazon, do any of you know about Amazon's Mechanical Turk? No? Okay. So Mechanical Turk on Amazon is where you can put up like data sheets and pay somebody a certain number of cents per data thing that they fill in. And they do all the research for you, fill in your data into your data sheets, and you pay them by the form that they fill out. So it's like major human effort to put together some data for you. Mechanical Turk was supposedly a robotic guy that theoretically could play chess, but it was a total fake out. There was a guy that hid inside that cabinet underneath, and when somebody moved the chess piece, it was wired to a chessboard that he had inside the box, and he would make the next move and it would move the thing up there. So it was a guy underneath. So total fake out. So kind of like the guy that was sitting inside the cardboard box during the printer and then sliding the card through the box. That's a mechanical Turk. You've got a guy you've got people doing something that is representing like it was being done in real life. So it's people power simulating advanced processes. They had this whole thing here that turned gears and stuff that did nothing. So you can frequently, it's kind of like UI UX in Vision. It's kind of a mechanical Turk in a way. It's not so much using people power, but it's using a very, very simple process to simulate that you're actually doing coding behind the scenes, which you're not. So, so that's a mechanical Turk. So again, it's a way to avoid a lot of costs. You test something out, see how people interact with it, see what kind of data you're pulling out before you start, subscribing to an expensive data source or something. And by the way, for those of you doing computing type projects, if you don't know about data.gov, please go take a look at data.gov. I deal with teams all the time that are looking to subscribe to some really expensive data source. The reality is anything that the federal government made, it belongs to you and me. We paid for it. So anything the feds make is in the public domain. And that means all the data that they're generating from all these different things is up on data.gov in one form or another. And if it's not, a lot of times there's like a placeholder. And one of the things that most people don't know is that if there is a program that you like that is up on data.gov, the data set might be up there, but the program may not be. You can actually do a Freedom of Information Act request for the program, and they actually have to turn it over under most circumstances, unless it's like CIA or something, which I have done. So, you can, all you have to do is ask most of the time. I had a student resource site in the 90s, and my site was the only one that had a direct search into the Library of Congress, because I contacted the Library of Congress and I said, we're mission aligned and I don't want students leaving my site because teachers get upset when they go off the site that they're on. And so I'd like a direct search from my site into your collections. And they sent me the code. And I didn't code back then, so I just took their code and plugged it in. And I had the only site out there that had a direct search into all the collections at the Library of Congress, because I asked. Everybody else sent their people off their site. So every time a student went to research something on the Library of Congress, they lost them from their site, and I kept mine. So, so ask. But data.gov, huge resource on data. There are data sets on everything that you can imagine. If you're doing anything for food in particular, the USDA has a whole data set on nutrition and products with complete nutrition breakdown, and you can download the whole thing. So yeah, go take a look at data.gov.
Cynthia, if I could interrupt you real quick, a story about, if I can interject about the mechanical Turk. The best example I've seen of it that I'm actually a client for is there's a lot of card scanning companies, right? So you get some business card from somebody, right? And there's all sorts of AI algorithms where you take a photo of it and some AI system tries to translate what's the name versus the title versus the office phone, the cell phone, all these kinds of things. And of course, they're pretty accurate, but they're still only 90% accurate or something, and 8 years ago or whatever, or 5 years ago or whatever, when I first was really trying to use it, it was inaccurate enough that it was annoying because you were constantly fixing the AI, a character off on there's a smudge from the coffee, right? And it ruins the AI. And so there's a company that was a startup that was that basically used Mechanical Turk instead. And what they did was the concept was they would you'd take a picture of the card and they would set up a Mechanical Turk request to the first two bidders who would do the human intelligence task, right? The hit, they call it in Amazon land, right? And these two people would type in the fields and they didn't know the other person was doing it, but two people got the request. And if all the fields lined up exactly right, it would say, okay, here's what the the data is off the card. If any of the fields didn't match, they would send it out to another person and then another person, and they would keep adding more people automatically, right? It was all automated until there was a clear consensus as to what the right data was, and then they would send it to you. And so it was always weird because they would say, we're processing your request, we should have it within an hour. And I'm like, it doesn't take a computer an hour to read this. And then I dug in and found out why they were so good. It was because they're using humans to do it.
I'll tell you another story on that one too, which was Google's image search. When they first started doing that, they were basically doing a Mechanical Turk to check on the accuracy of what they were pulling up on an image search. And I was part of that beta test. They had a game that you could play, which was you against the computer. So they would show you a set of images and ask you to title the images. And then they would have the computer title the images. And if your titles were better, then you got points. And so I used to go up and play for a few minutes every day on Google's thing because I knew what they were doing. They were double checking their image searches and seeing if what was coming up was coming up. Like one of the ones that they were having trouble with was Chihuahuas versus blueberry muffins. Surprisingly, they looked very similar. But another one that came up, which was really weird, was they had Siberian Huskies that frequently was coming up correct and sometimes was coming up incorrect. And it turned out that the AI that they had designed was picking up snow and a dog and titling it a Siberian Husky, which worked a lot of times, but was not perfect, obviously. And so it took a while for them to figure out that was the inaccuracy that the AI had picked up, was it was saying dog plus snow equals Siberian Husky. But with the people double checking against it, it started coming up, oh, this is flagged because the people are saying these are other breeds and our stuff is getting it wrong. Why is it getting wrong? And somebody finally caught that every time that it was saying it was a Siberian Husky, there was snow. So you have to watch out about that kind of thing. But yeah, human feedback, you can gamify it. There's all kinds of things that you can do to make your product better by doing gamification of one sort or another. So you can keep that in mind. Any questions on the Mechanical Turk? Okay. Okay, so one night stands. These are interesting. You probably will be familiar with one night stands as far as pop-up shops. So this is a Nike pop-up shop. Didn't exist, 30 minutes before it was there. So it's putting a service together without having the required infrastructure. We did not start this company in a factory. We started it in my garage. I had a $30,000 printer that took the place of my car in my garage. And my library, which I'm sitting in right now, turned into our assembly area. And it kind of grew into part of my living room as well. So it kind of took over my lower floor. And then we finally got a space after we validated a few things. But all the initial stuff was done in my house. In our furniture factory, we made prototypes of our furniture with just the face of the furniture, no back end, just the front part of the furniture. And then when we got it looking to the point that we thought it was pretty good, we actually rented a factory portion that already had 4 companies in it. And the agreement between all the people was whoever grew the fastest could push the smaller guys out. And so one by one, we pushed everybody out until we had the whole factory. But we couldn't have afforded the factory otherwise. It was a 100,000 square foot factory. And we had to grow into it. And that was a phenomenal luck in that we found on that one. But one night stands are putting something together quickly that you can test it out. You can do it in all sorts of different ways, whether it's a garage startup or whatever else, but putting a service together and avoiding that kind of complex back end is frequently what you'll see in pop shops. Facade is related, and that's probably more on target for what I was just talking about, which is, you know, don't have the space and equipment. In our case, we did buy the equipment, but I did buy it secondhand. So my $36,000 printer cost me $9,500 because I hit Craigslist and found a company that had just bought another company, and they ended up with an extra printer that they were trying to dump. It was brand new, literally. It had been bought like 3 weeks before they acquired the other company, but they already had two and they didn't need a third. So they put it up on the market for a fraction of what it should have cost. And so we bought it and, like I said, moved it in where my car was supposed to be. But again, those infrastructure things or those service bases, if you're doing a SaaS product, there's something that you should take a look at, which is a company named Corent, C-O-R-E-N-T. And it's actually run by another UCI person, Fazy. And he has a thing called the SaaS Ops within his structure. And it basically will take the core of what you're doing and wrap a SaaS platform around you. So they handle all the billing, all the profiles, all the stuff for your clients. They handle all that part. All you have to do is focus on what you do best. We're actually using them on one of our ventures right now. So again, Facade is, you know, if you're like I've worked with a couple of food startups and they've rented equipment in a existing kitchen in the evening to build their stuff because we didn't used to have too many commercial kitchens in Orange County. We still have a limited number, but if you go back, you know, like 10 years, there weren't any. And so it was really difficult to test out a food product. Now there's a few commercial kitchens in the area, but a lot of times you can go to an existing restaurant and say, you know, oh, you only do lunch and dinner? Great. Can I come in the morning and, you know, assemble my food product, you know, which is granola or something? You need to have a kitchen that's licensed. And a lot of times you can bootleg in with somebody else. And they're just happy that the space is getting used and they're getting an offset on their rent. So there's a lot of ways that you can buy or rent equipment to fake out that type of thing. Okay, so paper prototypes. Paper prototypes are really incredibly helpful. I started in architecture, and in a way, and Richard is an architect, my friend sitting in the meeting here. But we build models. We build models out of all kinds of paper. I built one model of, I had to do a model of the Guggenheim when I was at USC, and trying to figure out how to do that in paper was way beyond challenging. So I ended up actually taking a big hunk of wood and carving the wood to make the main structure of the Guggenheim Museum. And then the rest of it I built out with paper. But but putting together models of what you're trying to do is really helpful. And, you know, like one step up from this is a 3D model. One of my partners and I developed a type of authentication device. And when we wired it together, then it was like, well, how are we going to show people this? So at first we just kind of, again, I threw it on my computer and I kind of mocked up some things that might look nice. And then I gave it to one of my friends and he did a 3D printed watch case for us that was big enough to hold the cheapo throw together that we had done on the prototype. And it hid all the mechanisms so that we could actually have a working model. But the same kind of thing in these are paper models that they wired up so that, if you switch something, it flipped on a light and, it gave an idea of what you were going to be doing with it. But what it lets you do is kind of figure out the size of something, how much space you need for your mechanism. That's a big thing. In the perfect world, you might have a microchip and some really small things. But when you're doing your initial mock-ups on your engineering, you're using somebody else's chip and wires and boards and stuff that may take up more space than you anticipated. And so when you put that all together, then it's like, okay, well, how much space, what kind of thing can I put in somebody's hand that will hold all these components so that we can test it out? And will it be too big for them to test, right? So you can mock it up with these little quick paper and cardboard things and get a sense for that volume and that weight and the look of it, and then take it from there. And there are some really great resources for that kind of stuff. So, okay, so this is covert ink. This was one of my very first mock-ups here. So I had mocked up our translucent screen at the time to see how much it would block off the view into a home. I would, estimate. So I did transparencies of different levels for the screen based on the thickness of the material that we were using to see whether or not it would work. And then this was a standard curtain, and then this was the curtain open. So, yes, it obscured the couch behind him. You couldn't really see it. You could see a little bit in there, but if you didn't have it, you really saw a lot. And this is actually my house. This is an actual photograph of my house. So this is not the inside of my house that you're seeing there. That's a reflection of my rail on my deck because I live on a lake. And so these are actual screens that are in place behind my door that are pulled down. And you can see there's a light inside my house right there that's glowing through a little bit, and one over here. But that's all you see. So I have complete privacy in my home. Somebody can be outside, they can't see me, but I can see them. That's the weird thing about this stuff. The ones over here were mock-ups for a school, and you can see, and this is actually what it looks like. So from here, you can't see in, but the person on the inside can completely see through. The weird thing is you don't see the image. I don't see this image from inside my house. So from the outside looking in, all you see is the image. From the inside looking out, you see nothing but the view. So it's kind of pretty cool stuff. So resources. I put this stuff onto my one. Okay, there's a thing called One Tab. If you don't use it, you should. I'm going to share that with you. So this is One Tab. If you're anything like me, when you're researching, you have a gazillion tabs open. And One Tab lets you rapidly close them all. And here, I'll open up a couple and show you what I mean. So I can pull these off for a second. That one doesn't want to pop in. Anyway. Now I've lost it. Hold on. Got too many things open. So if I have these two open, say, and I want to rapidly close them, there's my One Tab. I click that and it puts it into a list on my browser. So I might have 35 tabs open that when I'm researching something, and I click once and it closes them all and makes me a list. And I can title the list, I can lock it, whatever. So what I'm going to do is, these are some of the resources that I use. So the professor up in Stanford, this is his site. So if you go to pretotyping.org, he actually has a sheet that you can download that has those information pages that had a lot of type on it. Those are his pages that are kind of reminders of what are going on. as far as things for doing UI UX prototyping, this is what I use. I use Envision. And they have you can have I think up to 3 projects in it for free. So you don't have to pay anything if you're doing your initial testing. I have teams that like Figma. Figma has one of those unending canvases, which I don't particularly love. But if you can navigate around on those and you like them, Figma works really well too. And they have some things that Envision has, and Envision has some things that they don't have. So it's kind of a trade-off on what you like. If you're starting on UI UX, or you're a programmer and you don't do much UI UX, I highly recommend going to material.io. This is Google's information on what good UI UX is. And they have resources and walkthroughs on basic components and development, on good design for user interaction. So I would definitely take a look at that. Okay, user onboarding. If you've never been to, most people don't know about this site, and it's like the best site ever. This guy has taken onboarding for people on your apps, and he did all these teardowns. So all of these are famous companies, obviously. And what he does is he takes you through, like here's Instagram, how they started. And this is how they onboard their people. So you go through his thing and it's all annotated. So he tells you what worked well, why it worked well. And then every now and then they'll do something and he goes, why did they do that? And so he tells you the good and bad about what companies did on their onboarding of their customers. And he's got a whole bunch of these teardowns. So when you're trying to figure out how to onboard people and actually keep them on your site, this is the place to go. And this thing under patterns, he talks about different types of onboarding, and he's got them broken down into different groupings. And so you can go through and see why he thinks a particular style is good for a particular type of thing. But great site, not well known, but really good. Okay, so prototyping, when you come to doing cardboard prototyping, this is a 3-part piece on this thing called the Making Society. And it gets into really detailed stuff about how to do some really cool stuff with cardboard. And there's 3 parts to it. The first one is more simple, and then they get more complicated. But they show you how to put together some basic stuff to mock up a shape and feel of something. So I really recommend that. And then this is another one that I thought was pretty cool. So this is the Skeptic's Guide to Low Fidelity Prototyping, also known as Pretotyping. And he goes through a very, very good walkthrough about why you should do it, what helps, what kinds of things there are, 2D versus 3D, UI UX compared to, how you would test it if you're showing somebody, maybe this is a mock-up for a little smart fridge or something. So taking people through this is a really good breakdown. And I'm going to give you a QR code where you can see all this stuff in a minute. And then this is, if you're not familiar with this, Y Combinator has a startup school that you can sign up for and go through. This is not their incubator. This is an online free community course that they put together. That they made a mistake one time and sent out a notice, and they got like 10,000 people that signed up. So they started doing the startup school. So I put this all on my one tab, and it lets me give you a QR code. So if you've got your phone handy, I made a web page out of it through one tab. If you snap this with your phone, you'll have all those links. So I'll give you a few minutes to snap that off before I shut this off. Did everybody get their picture? Okay. All right, then I'll stop sharing.
Hey, Sin, not to be Captain Obvious, but many people, I'll speak for myself, didn't know what one tab was until yesterday.
Yeah, one tab
So-
is like the best. I've been using it for years. I think I was one of their really early signups. It was, I think I saw it at a demo event, and I thought, oh, I'll try it out. And I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to get rid of this thing. But it's really helpful because you can, in addition to it making that list, you can lock the lists. You can tell it to make a web page out of it, which I just did. So all those are on a persistent web page on their site. And so it makes that QR code, and I can give you the QR code and you can access those links anytime you want. So, you know, my bookmarks, I save at least, you know, once every couple of weeks, because I literally have tens of thousands of links in my bookmarks that are all foldered and subfoldered and stuff. So, but I have those. Oh, the other thing I was going to give you was a thing to help you with founders questions. A lot of times you're trying to figure out who should have what inside a company when you're first starting out. And that's always a problem. So let me share one more time and just show you this. So there's a thing called the co-founder equity calculator. And it's, if you go to founderswithnoe.com, it gives you, you can put in your team, and then it asks you questions. It allows up to 4 team members. And when you finish, it gives you a calculation down here of what it thinks your equity should be per team member. And it's based on what kind of roles you're filling inside the company, who's putting up money, you know, are you working full-time or part-time, you know, all those types of things. And I found that when I've run through this with teams, it's been pretty darn close to what was reasonable. And if nothing else, it gives you a starting point for a conversation, because, you know, you can fill it out, your friends can fill it out on their own, and then you can compare notes. You may think that you're spending most of the money, and somebody else may think that they're spending most of the money. Or maybe they didn't give you credit for money that you spent. So you can compare how you filled out the questionnaire and then what the equity base is. But it's a really good place to start for that conversation. And then the other one that I really like people to do is, this is another one. I think it's this one. No, this one is a little bit more complicated. This one. So when you're trying to figure out how much equity you should give up for different things, this is really great to run. You can put in your founders, you can add additional founders or delete them out. And you can put in what your initial calculation is on your equities. Now, one thing I will tell you, please always vest all the founders. Do not just assign money away, shares away within your company to somebody, because everything goes wrong when that happens. I ended up in court for 5 years with a partner, and we made it all the way up to the Supreme Court of California. I prevailed, but it was really bloody expensive, so don't do it. So learn from my mistake, always vest your founders, and it'll avoid a lot of problems down the line. Put a vesting and a cliff. Now, if you don't know what vesting is, it means that you don't get all your shares right away. Typical vesting of shares that investors like is 4 years. So if you're going to give somebody 10% of your company, they get it over the course of 4 years. And normally there's what they call a 1-year cliff, which means if you leave in the first year, you don't get anything. You walk, you get no part of the company. You don't take it with you. Anything that you put in, it's a lesson learned. Go do something else. But that protects you guys that move forward with the company from somebody coming in and not doing the work they said they were going to do. And it also protects the company from blowing up. So, but this lets you model and see, you know, how things are going to set up, right? So if this guy has 50%, this guy has 30, and this guy, I mean 20, and that guy has 30, you can save it and it changes your pie chart here. And then you can say, okay, pre-money valuation may be low, maybe $500,000. And you're raising maybe $1 million. Well, now the investors own most of your company, right? And they're going to want you to have an option pool. So this is set asides for employees that may be coming in. So maybe you can talk them down to a 10% option pool. So this is what it's going to look like. And two of your founders have these little slivers over here. Now, it may be good for you. It may not be good. This lets you do 3 rounds of investing. And you can see that on the defaults that they put in, this is how much the 2 of those founders have, 1%, 1%, and 2%. Now, you might find that between this stage and this stage, or this stage and this stage, if you're modeling out, that it doesn't pay for you to go to this round. You might want to sell when you hit this round before you take any more investment, because you start getting diluted out so much that it just doesn't pay. Or you may find that you don't want to take the money that they're offering you because they would take too much of your company too early. So this lets you run really, really quick scenarios on investments. And, my partners and I have, decided to bootstrap a lot of times because we want to get to a higher valuation point before we take investment because of this problem. But this is a really good way of sitting down with your friends that are starting the company with you and run some scenarios of how much you think you need and how much somebody's going to want to take from you to give you that money, and see what you end up with. So highly recommended. But I'll put this link into the chat. As soon as I stop sharing, you can see it again.
Cynthia, that's better than Shark Tank.
Oh, we'll definitely catch your attention.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that was my quick run through on all of this stuff. Anybody have any questions? I don't bite. You can ask me anything. Okay, Edward?
Hi, I just wanted to ask a quick question regarding what you were mentioning at the very beginning regarding research, because you're saying that you are really strong at finding research and finding the information that you need. And I was just curious, like maybe what are some of the sources that you use, and like what are some of the methods that you employ in trying to find the
Okay,
things
well,
that
I
you
have
need?
a funny trick for you, which is when you're trying to figure out, okay, number one, most people do top-down market sizing, which has its place, but is usually not very good. And you usually pick the wrong target. Like I've seen guys that say, oh, I'm making gerbil food, and look at the pet market. This is our total market. And you're going, no, it's not. That includes horses and dogs and cats and veterinary services and buying animals. It's not just the food. So make sure that you're looking for the right thing when you're doing research. A lot of times you're looking for the wrong thing. However, there is a very funny little trick that I learned a number of years ago when I started searching stuff. If you're looking for statistics and you want to find, like large scale statistics on stuff, even some of the shorter stuff, if you go to Google Images, not regular Google, and you put in your search terms, so you say market size, dog food, gourmet. So if you're Rachel Ray, you're doing a gourmet dog food. And then at the end of whatever your search terms are, put infographics. All the big research companies put out these beautiful infographics with your primary data on them. So it'll tell you the main market size for the US, the main market size globally. It may give you some breakdowns on it usually gives you the growth rate, over the past 5 years or 10 years or whatever, and what the expected growth rate is for the next 5. All that is on that infographic. And so if you're looking for like large scale, quick data stuff that you need to put into decks for at least part of your figuring of market size, that's the way to find it. So anytime you're looking for statistic type stuff, that is a really good way to find quick statistics, and frequently in a format that you can literally grab their entire chart and drop it into your deck, which I often do. They usually are cited. And that's another thing. If you're making a deck, please always cite your source on any number that you put in. Almost nobody does it. And also don't round things off to round numbers, because if you have something that says 10,000 or 100,000, investors figure you pulled the number out of your ear, because nothing is ever a round number. And if you do have that weird time when it is a round number, make it a 0.1 or a 0.99, because they won't trust it if it's round. Take it out one extra digit. But that's one of the things that I do constantly, which gets me to information very, very fast. Statista is a good source. I would have told you Owler, but I don't think they have a free version anymore. I actually pay for my version on theirs. Crunchbase. Crunchbase is super, super helpful. If you don't know about it, it's a database on startups. So you can take a look and see who's doing what. Even without a subscription on that one, you can actually get to a lot of data. And if you are actively pushing your company into startup mode, make sure that you put a profile for yourself and your company up there, because that's where everybody finds you.
On where?
Crunchbase. So
Crunchbase?
yeah, Crunchbase is the ultimate startup database. So here, I'll show you. There's the link. And this is Crunchbase. Give me a second. Okay, so this is Crunchbase. So I can put in seasonally fresh, which was one of our startups that we put on hold. So this is actually our profile for our startup, and crazy, we're on all sorts of lists that I didn't know about since the last time I had checked. Look at all the lists that we got put on. Yeah, so this is Crunchbase. So you can put a search in on a particular type of company. You can look for recent acquisitions, which is what I use it for a lot. Is I'll take a look when I'm putting my decks together to see who's got what related to a particular area. And I can take a look and see who's been acquired within the last 6 months or year. And so I usually have a slide that shows in our sector, these companies were acquired by by somebody for this much money. So it makes investors go, ooh, people are investing, right? So Crunchbase is great. Another thing that you should know about is called the Wayback Machine, archive.org. Okay, so it's archive.org/web. And there's actually an extension on Chrome browsers for this thing. Oops. Wow, that never happens. Let me see if it'll reload. They must be rebooting something. I have never seen that on archives. What this lets you do, and unfortunately they're having a problem of some sort, you can put in a website and it actually goes through and screenshots the internet every day. Millions of screenshots of the internet. And so you could go to your competitor's website and see what it looked like when they started their company. And that will give you enormous amounts of insights on your competitor. Because when companies start off, they will frequently show you what their team configuration was like for the first few months. It may be 2 founders at the beginning, and then 3 months later, you see that they have a team of 5, and a year later, they have a team of 25. And usually someplace around there, they stop putting them up on the website. But it shows you who they had. They might have had 4 programmers and 6 customer service people, a development person, and maybe an AI person. But you can see what their configuration was like as far as their teams. You can see how they onboarded their people. a lot of times their stuff will be completely open at the beginning. And that frequently is able to click through stuff even on archives. I really wish it wasn't offline for some reason. This actually saved my butt one time when I was going through all the legal battles, because the creep that I was in, that I was having the problem with, accused me in court of forging documents that I had found on the internet that proved that they had done something nefarious. And when I copied it and put it into the court in a filing, they had contacted the people that owned the website and had them pulled the information down and said, oh, it never existed. She forged all those documents. Luckily, I knew about the Wayback Machine, and I went into the Wayback Machine and it had been archived. I pulled it up on Wayback Machine, gave it to the judge, and we got the largest finding against a legal firm for falsely accusing somebody in court. They got sanctioned for $22,000 in the county of Orange, which was like unheard of at the time, for accusing me of forgery when they knew I had not forged the documents. And the company that had come to testify on their behalf, when they saw what I had, switched sides and testified on my behalf. So it's a very helpful thing to know about. I will be forever grateful for the guys that put that thing together. But normally it is not, I've never seen it offline, so something must have hacked their system. But it was something that was like a research project before 9/11, and after 9/11 it became a funded government and nonprofit thing, but they've got gazillions of petabytes of data. And it comes up in like a calendar view. So you can see how many times it's been indexed, and you can go to any calendar date and see what it looked like on that date. So it's really cool. So those are some of the like really quick things that I use all the time. But is there anything in particular, like research, that you would be doing?
I mean, that was very, very insightful. Thank you. I mean, nothing super specific that I can think of off the top of my head right now. Perhaps I'll think about it for a little bit. Maybe I'll ask you a little bit later.
Sure. I mean, if you're looking for data sources, again, I'd go to data.gov to start.
Okay.
There's a gazillion databases up there, and literally on a one-click download. So they have these huge, massive databases that you can download on a click.
Mm-hmm.
And frequently they'll have a companion site where you can actually search on the internet. But if you want the data to do your own stuff with it, you can download the data.
Okay, cool.
So that's a good one. And if you haven't tried contacting people in the federal government for stuff, boy, they're really easy. All of their contact information is required to be up online. And I think before COVID, it's changed a little bit since COVID, but before COVID, they were required to try to get an answer to a person that contacted them within 72 hours. So you can ask them all kinds of questions, and they actually have a requirement to answer. So anybody else have stuff that they'd be researching or looking into that they want to ask about?
Cynthia, I'm going to throw one other little trick for Google. A lot of times the image thing is, you're spot on. When you type it into the image search engine, it works wonders, especially in the form of an infographic. So thanks for sharing that. The other thing I found is that a lot of news articles, so if you go over to the news link, you don't have to go to the news link because the general one will search too. A lot of times they will, a company that writes these big reports that it costs 10 grand to find out about the size of the pet market in America, these kinds of things. Those kinds of, like a CB Insights, right? These expensive reports, they will usually tease into PR the data. So they'll have key stats like the total market size for the dog industry, was 16.9 billion, these kinds of stats. And the press releases, for whatever just quirk of the English language in America, right? They always use the phrase "according to," And it's always according to a study by the blah, the blah blah blah. The size of the market is this, according to a recent study by. And so if you put in quotes according to, it will limit all of your search to size of market, pets, whatever. And according to will make it so that it has some sort of reference point, which is usually the data point that you want to go find. So you can either then cite the news article or the teaser, or you at least know what report you want to try to go grab. And you can either see if you can get that report, or if you can go to the library and get it through, a VPN or something through the data stacks that they have. Or a great thing to do is to go to the librarian and say, hey, I want this data that's in this kind of report. What's an alternative source for this? I couldn't get access to this one because it's $8,000. And at least then you have something to point to as an alternative. So according to in quotes is a great way of finding cited information. And then you'll know where the original source of data can come from.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So CB Insights, I had mentioned, and they have these things called market maps that are unbelievable. So I put the link in there for you guys, and this is what they look like. So this happens to be on their Unicorn Club. So these are the most recent one, 936 private companies that are valued over $1 billion. But what they do is they break down all these market maps into these groupings, and they give you their logo. And what that allows you to do is, if you're in the artificial intelligence industry and you want to know who the movers and shakers are, here they are. And so they put these out for all different kinds of industries. And sometimes you might click into one that is locked out because it was only for their current customers, which this one might be. Yeah, this is for only their clients. They usually release it after a year, but for the first year, they may have it locked out. But an awful lot of these are open. And you can take a look and see. Some of them you can request. This is one you can request. But going through these market maps, when you do a search on Google and you go into images and you look for, let's take a look at agriculture market map for CB Insights. These are their market maps. So if you can see the whole map on Google, it's one that you can see. And so this is one on, it comes with a report that they can send you. Oh, that one is actually locked out. That's really funny because I can get at it from Google, which is also the case a lot of times. So if you do an open image in new tab, there's a market map. So if you're doing data and analysis in the agriculture industry, here's people that are doing animal data analysis. You should know all 6 of those companies. And just like on Crunchbase, you can make an account and sign into CB Insights to put your own profile for your company in. So once you're actually up and running and you start making some headway, put yourself into their database, because they'll start kind of keeping an eye on you at that point, especially if you get funding, you move up the chain on their look-see. But these are killer. I've used these a lot of times. And there are times where I'll actually cut this out and drop it into my deck and cite it as CB Insights to show who I'm dealing with. But I love their market maps. They give you so much information, and there's, if you can't find a market map on your topic, I would be shocked. They have hundreds and hundreds of these things. And there are a couple other companies that do market maps as well. If you take off the CB Insights, there are a couple competitors. Like this is one. Sometimes they're using the CB Insight technique database to build their own market maps, which they, if they're a subscriber, they can actually make a market map of their own and put it out under their own company. So here's Ag Funder News. They apparently subscribe to CB Insights. And, if you take a look at it, this is a giant one. So that's the farm tech landscape based on these guys, which is, you can go into precision applications or imaging or sustainable tools, and they've got the breakdown on them. So, but yeah, these are super, super helpful. So that's just another one.
So Cynthia, I have to say you do not disappoint. Thank you for all of your insights. Cynthia, are you willing to share your contact information if one of them reaches out to me?
Sure. You can always find me on LinkedIn. This is my full name, and I am basically LinkedIn, the / and Cynthia Kirkaby. So there's only one up on LinkedIn. That's me.
Yeah. Well, there's only one of you, Cynthia. And the world is
sometimes it may be one too
it.
many, but there is one of me.
Well, thank you for all your insights. Thank you for providing us with such great understanding of pretotyping, as well as giving us a rundown of some of the wonderful tools that you use to navigate the entrepreneurial world. So let's everyone, if we can, give her a big virtual Zoomish round of applause, whatever you choose to do to thank Cynthia. Cynthia is a wealth of information. I put her link. And I have to tell you, she is one of those people that if she doesn't know the solution to something, she'll tell you. And next thing you know, she'll tell you how to go find the answer or to test an experiment to find the answer, whatever it is. So great resource.
I mean, if you get stuck on research on something, feel free to drop me a note on LinkedIn, because a lot of times I can help you find something. And I'm a really good designer. I have degrees in design and writing. I'm pretty good on tech, but I am spectacular on research. So yeah, if you run into a brick wall, I can probably point you in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, let me take just a couple of seconds here, and this feels hollow compared to your presentation when it comes to resources.
The library people, man, they are killer good.
Yeah. So I have mentioned it, and I keep it in here, and I will keep badgering on it. We have one of the few universities in the country that actually has a librarian dedicated to innovation and entrepreneurship. And if that isn't a reason to attend UCI, I don't know what is. They're phenomenal over there. Use the resources that are there. And if you get lost, they will sit down and have an appointment with you virtually or in person and do all of that. So I won't go through all these in detail, but if you haven't found out about the new venture competition yet, shame on us for not getting the word out to you. But certainly take a moment and copy down this link. I'll put the link in the window for you here. But there's several opportunities in there. You can work on the Beall Butterworth, as well as, of course, the new venture competition. Both organizations give out a ton of money. So what are your next steps? I'm going to put all these in here for you. If you haven't done an intent to enter, it's not required, but it just helps us make sure you're notified of things and that you're planning to be a part of it. Our next workshop is next Wednesday. Notice the red text. Believe it or not, we're going to be in person. The campus is officially open. We will not be live streaming it, but we will record it and make it available afterwards. But it will be at ISEB 1010. If you're not familiar with the naming and numbers, it's a new building on campus that was finished during the pandemic. And it's also where the kickoff was. So that might help narrow down for some of you who were there for that. So you'll want to take a chance to register for that. The link is in the chat message I just put in. Share this with your friends. Of course, stay up to date at the website. Don't forget that in a little over a month and a half or so, you're going to have your concept paper and product specs due. If you need help, don't be hesitant to reach out and get some help. And of course, get started. And then the NVC has got workshops. Their next one, I believe, is this coming Monday. I think that one will be virtual, but then the following ones will be in person. With that, thank you, everybody. Thank you for all of your time. Cynthia, again, thank you from the bottom of my heart and from all of us for all of your time and thoughts. We appreciate it, and we'll definitely keep in touch with you as we run into research and pretotyping issues. With that, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. For those of you who are in the class, I will see you guys in about 15 minutes over in the class Zoom. But thank you to all, and we'll see you guys. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you, guys. Have fun with the competition.